2024 was just one of those years. I'm going to share a little bit about how I weathered the storm of 24 and how I plan to just blow 2025 out of the water. Got two little tips for you. So I hope you tune in and listen up. All right. Well, 2024 was one of those years where basically it wasn't a great year, wasn't a terrible year. It just was one of those unforgettable years, right? Well, and one thing that I have learned is that in my career, I've had a lot of unforgettable years and a handful of forgettable years. And I don't know, maybe it should have been the other way around, but it's not too late to start striving for that. I did want to go over two tips that I want to share with you for maybe 2025, for making 2025 a better year for you, but also improving your attitudes and also increasing what you can gain from situations in 2025. So I'll just share with you one of my favorite words that I was using when I was coming up in the speaking and consulting industry was the U word, unless. So unless was one of those terms that people, they don't expect it, right? So if somebody would say, well, we're not going to book you for that, we're going to go with someone else, I would say, okay, thank you very much, I appreciate that. You're not going to book me for that unless I come up with different skills or unless I'm able to improve on this or that. And then I would be quiet, because we need to let people think. You've heard me talk about this in previous, conversation discussions, where basically when you ask an unexpected question of people, you need to give them time to process it. And so I'm not trying to be confrontational with the people that I ask this to, but what I am looking for is an answer for why I haven't been picked for this particular project. So I'll give you a real example that happened to me when I was looking to start speaking on coding. And one of the meeting planners that I met said, we're not looking for anyone new in the coding department. And I said, unless? And he looked at me and he said, what do you mean unless? And I said, unless what would happen to make that change? And he said, well, somebody would have to die, or I'd have to leave this position, or, you'd have to really make a name for yourself. Okay, well, I'm not going to wish death on anyone, right? And I'm not going to try to get him out of his job. So that's beside the point, right? But what I could do was make a name for myself. And that's one of those things that I took away from that conversation. And while, when I've told the story to colleagues, they've said, wow, what a jerk for, telling you straight up that you just weren't getting the job. Yeah, he was definitely a jerk. I'm not going to argue with that. And I can still see his face, and had a little, kind of a jerky smile on his face when he gave me the news. But I also am very thankful for the fact that I asked the question and that he actually gave me an answer that I could do something with. It was an actionable answer, right? So I remember running into him years later, and did he ever, invite me to speak for that particular group? Well, no, because he had moved on and he was not in charge of that anymore. But the current leader of that particular study club did invite me to come and speak for that group. And I was great. They loved it and I loved it. We had a great time, a great day. And he came up to me at the end and said, nice to see you again. And that's about it. We didn't go down that road again. I didn't feel like I needed to bring it up. But what he did was, by the gift of his, I guess, rudeness, I guess you could call it that, and bluntness, is that he actually gave me an answer that I could do something with. Okay, so that's fine. So I'll give you some other implications for using the word unless. So the phrase unless, when you're using it, you're controlling the conversation. Again, that's something that I've talked about in previous discussions. If you're not in control of the conversation, then you are definitely at risk for losing control of the whole topic, right? And not getting respected for even trying to bring it up the next time that it needs to be discussed. Well, let's talk about this. So say you have somebody that wants to go up in position in your office. Maybe let's say your dental assistant now wants to be promoted to lead dental assistant. There's an opening now and she wants to move up in there. So you are able to have a good discussion with them. Maybe they come to you and they say, hey, this is something I want to do. You can actually turn this around and you could say, at this point, I don't really see that you have the qualifications for it. So we had somebody in mind for it. We are interviewing for it. We'd like somebody separate from the office, whatever your reason is for not giving the job to this person. You, as a manager, you, as somebody that's in a leadership position, could add to that and say, unless. And so you're not promising them, but you would say you would be considered for this job, or you're not being considered for this job because of this, this, and this. That would change if you were able to do this. So you're basically giving them a pathway. And I hope that you're doing that anyways. Anytime somebody is turned down for a position or for a project, I hope that you're giving them some way out of that, because when someone is denied opportunity, they tend to sink back into the hole, and they feel like it's a hole. They feel like they're trapped. They feel like they're never going to be able to move past it, right? So we need to give them a way out of that hole. And by telling them that unless you had these skills, do you have these skills? Unless you're able to get this certification that we've been, requiring for this position, unless you could become more familiar with the formulary, the inventory that we have in this office, there's lots of things that you could do with that. So unless is something that you could use when you're having a conversation with somebody you work with. But it's also, again, going back to my first example, it's something that you could use to inquire as to what you could do better. So the next time somebody says to you, I don't think you're a good fit, just stop them and just say, not a good fit unless I was able to, and then let them answer you. You might be surprised, actually. And it might, if anything else, it might get them to rethink, why are they so against you for this project? One thing that I have learned working with tons of managers over the years is that when you work with a doctor owner for a long time, the conversations between yourself and the doctor owner, they're kind of the same over and over again, right? You guys have discussed the same thing over and over. You know his or her thoughts and they know your thoughts on it. And when you're getting ready to go in and ask again for something, you're going to have the same conversation again, right? So, one thing that I've realized is that we tend to just get into this habit of saying no first until we're given information that could change the decision. And I'm not really sure if I can fix that in a podcast, but that is something that I have seen in, I don't want to say couples, unless you're actually a couple, but when two people have worked together for a long time, they have this synergy, they have these habits, they have this rhythm, right? And sometimes that rhythm is, I know she's going to ask, I know he's going to ask, let's just shut it down now. I don't want to get into it. And so we tend to just kind of push that off to the side. So what I would say to you is, if you're in that situation, maybe this word unless can open up the door. So, we're not going to get same day, we're not going to get the milling machine this year. Unless, what would have to happen in order for us to get the milling machine? Well, we'd have to blow through this production number, and we'd have to get through this collections amount. We'd have to set this goal. Those are all things that maybe now you can take one by one and decide how you're going to tackle that. So that's the first U word that I wanted to go over with you. That's the unless. So the most powerful U word in my vocabulary is something that I use for myself. All right. So, and it's the word until. So until is, to me, I'm putting guardrails around what it is that I am striving for, what it is that is my project, how much time I'm going to give to this particular effort. So in your managerial day, for example, owner day, for example, you have an employee and you're already doing this until, because during the probationary period, the trial and error period, you already have an until. So they have until 90 days to prove that whatever. So a lot of times our 90 days is just baked in because that's part of our whole office manual thing. Well, what if it wasn't 90 days? What if you had your own until? And most of you do. Most managers, anytime you brought on somebody and you've onboarded somebody, you already had an until. A lot of times it's until they annoy me, until they say this certain thing 3 times, until I have to tell them this 3 times, right? That until is very powerful because you have reached that by your own trial and error. So don't ignore the internal untils that you have. If you know that someone is going to drive you absolutely nuts if they may have this particular behavior, you need to pay attention to that. Conversely, if you're a manager and you're a doctor and you know something is going to annoy him or her, that's their until. They're actually trusting you to know that and to realize that if this person goes there, that's the drawing. That's it. That's the line in the sand they've drawn, and we need to respect that. So, the other piece of until is anytime that you want to try something different. Now, as a manager, I've heard from ton of you actually this year, or I'm sorry, 24. So we're going to say 24, that you want to do something new for next year. You would like to maybe do some more mentorship. You'd like to start some more projects in your office. You'd like to try a new onboarding system. You'd like to try a new piece of software. You'd like to try some AI. Lots and lots of things there, right? So as a manager, I always wanted to try lots of different things. I just didn't have a lot of time to try all the different things because all the other things were taking up time and energy in my life. So when you are choosing a new project, okay, it's very important for you to maintain your until. So we're going to try this new software, and then of course be reasonable about it. You're not going to master any new software in 3 months. You've got to give yourselves a good period of time, and you've got to make sure that you set yourself up for success. But there has to be an end point where if something is not working, you have to do something to eliminate that point of stress from your life and everybody's life. If something isn't working for the whole team, you've reached that until. You need to take steps to see that that doesn't, demoralize the people who are working and feel like they're not getting any progress, right? I remember working with one office and the doctor had switched to a new sensor, so for their images, and a new software program for their images. And it, for some reason, one of the assistants was just could not master it. And it was also the associate that the assistant was working with. They just had a hard time. The software, the assistant wasn't really good with the software, even as much training as she tried, and the associate just was not used to the quality of the radiographs that were coming out. So there's a lot of layers to that particular story. But what we learned from that particular office is that that constant butting of the heads against the wall, it feels like, because if you're telling somebody that something's not working and it doesn't get fixed, then you're basically doing that, right? Like you're just banging your head against the wall. So that was enough for the associate to feel like her objections to this software weren't being listened to. And basically, she was being told, suck it up, master it, get it right. So were they going to switch completely different software in order to make this work? I don't know. We didn't get to that point. What had ended up happening was we had to have a real talk with the owner dentist, because the fact is this was so demoralizing for this particular employee, the associate, that it was trickling down to the assistant and it was actually affecting everybody around them. And to be clear, it's not like she was going back and complaining and doing all of the whispering and all that. You could just tell that she was becoming more and more unhappy in the position that she was in. And so that is something that you have to learn as a manager. So your until may not be somebody else's until. And you are going to have to reach out and see, is this really an until moment for them? Or is this something that I can help them with? So in that particular case, the owner actually ended up paying for a full day of training, even though they just had it 4 months ago, a full day of training with the software consultant. And they came out, and actually it was more for that one associate, but they made it sound like it was for the whole office. And that one associate got specialized training on there. And although she wasn't 1000% thrilled, she was happy that she got some extra help. And as far as I know, she's still there. X-rays still look good and all that kind of thing. So the other piece about Until is that as a manager, going back to our projects that we tend to take on, and I'm a small business owner. I was a manager until I was a small business owner, and I feel like I still have the same problems with these passion projects that I have. So one issue that I have is passion projects that I really, really want to get into. I don't have the time to really devote because somebody needs to work to pay the bills, right? Like that's what happens, right? So I understand that my company is part of what drives the revenue in my own family, right? So I need to make sure that that keeps going. Passion projects are passion projects. They don't really start to make a lot of money until later. Well, what if you, though, decide to take the leap? and do this passion project. And many of you will. And I know for some of you, you're very talented. Some of you actually have a side business doing something else. I have a friend who's in Ohio and she has a side business with whiskey barrels and she makes furniture. That's amazing, right? So talented. I just can't do that. What happens though if those passion projects actually start to be more harmful to your psyche than to be involved in it? And so, what if the passion project isn't making money? What if you're actually spending a lot of money? What if it's driving a wedge between yourself and your family or your loved ones, right? So, there has to be some sort of limit on how much effort you're going to put into your own passion project, whether it's through your work as a manager or by yourself as, hobby or as a small business owner, because there is a point where it is actually harmful to keep pushing past, because you then start to alienate others around you in pursuit, your own dogged pursuit of something. So, as a manager, though, let's go back to the office setting. So, as a manager, I will go ahead and say, I'm going to, let's see, let's talk about training the front office on using AI for verifying claims eligibility, using a service and all of that. Okay, fine. So we're going to take the steps and do that. There's two things I have to do as a manager. I have to make sure that the people are on board, right? And that they're ready for this project. Then the second thing is I have to make sure that the ROI is involved in that project. So, let's throw out the eligibility and verification thing. Let's talk about marketing. This is a better example. Sorry about that. So let's talk about marketing. So I'm going to implement a new marketing strategy. Say I'm going to start advertising on the local theater. How about that? This is a true thing that I know one of my offices did for a while, and it was very, very successful. They actually bought screen time before movies at local theaters. Now, to be fair, this was before COVID. I know going to the theaters isn't as popular as it was before COVID. So, your mileage may vary, but let's say that. Let's just say, for example, we're going to do that. We're going to buy screen time at the theater. So this is something that is going to cost money. It's got to have ROI in order to continue to work, and we've got to be able to measure it, right? So my until is the tipping point is it's not making money and it's too hard to manage. So any project that is not making money and is not going, you don't foresee that it's going to make any money, and it's actually becoming so hard to manage. Those are two things that you have to reach, or to realize that you've reached your own personal until. Now, I don't want to discourage you if you're in the middle of something and you're like, wow, according to what you're saying, Teresa, I should probably abandon what I'm doing on the side. I don't know. I don't know your project, and if you're working on something and you're rocking it out and you want to share it, or if you're nervous about it, leave me a note, on the show notes. You can send me a message, or if you're on listening to this on YouTube, put it in the comments. Let me know what you're working on. What I'm saying is that you're going to have to foresee some results in order to validate it, right? So if you're doing this and you're like, well, and I say to you, well, how do you know if it's successful? Your answer, let's think about the movie theater thing. Your answer should be, well, we're getting new patients that actually come in and say, we saw your ad in the movie theater. Okay, so that's measurable. So that's something that you can predict. But if you were to say to me, I don't know, I make one sale. If I'm able to, build this website and get people to visit my website, if you're not sure what your goals are, what the ROI is going to be, it's not really a project. It's sort of a wish list that you're working towards, right? So until there's that until you can put some guardrails around it, then it is sort of a time suck, right? Now, that's what hobbies are for. So I'm not saying abandon your hobby, but there's a point in time when your hobby can't be your main expenditure, right? Like your main amount of time that you're spending on stuff. That becomes harmful, because if it is failing, believe me, I've had some stuff that's gone bad in the past, some initiatives I've had on my own. That actually sits with you for a long time. Failure is tough. Not able to do what you thought you could do is really hard on your mind. It's really hard on your psyche. And I don't want you to go through that if that's what you see in the future and you just don't want to stop it. Now is the time for you to start setting up your own boundaries. We're going into a brand new year. Start setting up your own boundaries. I will work on this project until. Give yourself an end date or end goals, right? Like these are the things that would make me stop this particular project. So there's lots of new goals that are going to be thrown around next year. I'd love to know what some of your own are. Just very quickly, I don't want to take up too much time, but I'm sharing that my passion project that I have put guardrails on, I know if this does not work, if this doesn't make X amount of money, I already have it mapped out. If I don't get this many members within a certain period of time, and it's a long period of time, it's a year, then I am going to take a look at disbanding it and not going forward with it. I'll finish out commitments and, of course, be good with it. I don't think that's going to happen because I've already seen some progress. But when I was planning this out, I was fully prepared to do that because it would be more harmful on myself as a business owner and myself as just a person with feelings, right? Like I would hate to fail, and putting yourself out there is very, very scary. My new project is Dental Revenue Network, and it's a membership for people who are in revenue cycle management and specifically business owners of revenue cycle management companies, whether it's an outsourcing billing company, whether you own a company with technology for that, but also for billers. So there's two categories for it. I opened it because I thought, wow, there's a lot of Facebook groups. Some are great, some are not great. There's a lot of forums. Some are great, some are not great. But really, what I kept hearing was, I wish there was a way that we could talk about this to each other without all of the rhetoric and all of the, you're doing this wrong and why would you do it this way? And, social media people are not necessarily the most pleasant, right? So, is it a safe space? No, not necessarily, but it is a place where if you want to ask a question, you're going to get a civil answer and you're going to be a very helpful answer from judging from some of the conversations that I've seen in there. So I did a soft launch in August, really put some goals around or some bones around it in November, and membership has been growing mostly organically, which is really nice. It's a lot of word of mouth. So if you're interested, taking a look at it right now, the pricing is really good just because, I was a little nervous to launch it and I didn't want to, outprice the market. Now, I would say probably February or so, I'm going to be raising the rates a little bit more as it gets more full, but I'm excited. It's a full community of billers, people who love to talk about revenue cycle management, including insurance and all of the ways to make a billing company work, to work with a billing company, but also to provide the best service that you can to people in need of revenue cycle management help, whether it's a doctor, whether it's a manager of a doctor. There's lots of different markets in this particular segment, right? So I just wanted to bring all together people who have the same passion for insurance and RCM that I do, which is, some of you have heard me speak. I get pretty passionate about this stuff. Just a reminder to check out the companies who support the show. My friends at Synergy Dental Partners are offering 2 free months to try out their lower prices for labs, supplies, and select software services. To sign up, visit odysseymgmt.com/synergy, and the link is also in the show notes. The other piece on this too is I kept getting asked in classes, could we just pay to have access to your brain? Well, that's kind of weird, but I understand because there are certain people that I really adore and love, and I would love to have access to their brain and how they think. So I was like, okay, well, I keep hearing this. So that's what Dental Revenue Network is. It's basically me. I'm putting together something called skill sessions where I'm going to go deep dive into certain topics so that if you want to learn more about, I'm working right now on what is the difference between Medicare Advantage and Medicare. So it's not going to be a comprehensive course, but it's going to be enough for you to say, okay, I understand this and I need to learn more, and I'll give you resources on that. There's a lot of stuff in there too about insurance billing. So it's going to be built out a lot more through the year. We've got regular meetups. I don't want to go too in depth on this. So you can hear the passion. Did you hear all of that? I just kind of got into it because that's why they call it a passion project. I've had this passion for a while, but I was really nervous and scared to put it into action. And so now that it's out there for the world to see, I'm fully prepared for people to go, this is never going to make it. And I'm also fully prepared for a lot of people to say, where have you been? And to sign up. And that's the energy I'm taking into 2025, because I do think that there's a time and a place for this. Now, I want to circle back though to how you can make 2025 an amazing year, because you're going to have all sorts of initiatives and projects and all that. So remember, if somebody says no to you, find out why, find out what the unless is. What is it that that person sees as the sticking point? Because it could be ridiculous. It could be something for you to work on. And then the until. Put guardrails around your time. You're going to invest energy until this starts to happen, or you're going to invest energy into this employee until this starts to happen. It's so important to have your line in the sand. So many people around you have it. And I think as managers, a lot of times we just keep going and hoping that we can train the heck out of this person. And sometimes it's just not going to happen, right? Sometimes technology just doesn't click. And sometimes different processes and procedures, they don't work in your office. So you have to know as a manager, when can I recognize that? When can I put a stop to it, right? So rounding this out, my wish is that for both of us, you and me, that next year is going to be a year of just wild, wild happenings, wild expectations, right? We're going to have huge expectations for the projects we start. And I also hope that we have wild accomplishments, and that my message to you at the end of 25 is going to be, wow, what a year. Thank you to all of you new Dental Revenue Network members. There's another plug for you. But also, I hope that 2025 is more of a loving year, meaning that you receive a lot of love from a lot of people, and that I hope that it's also a very graceful year. And really, I want it to be you giving yourself grace to try new things, to try new projects, and to celebrate when you do. I hear all the time from managers who like, I did this and I did this. And I go, wow, that's a huge thing. And they go, well, yeah, I don't think you guys realize just how much you do in the office, and you should celebrate yourself. When you make something huge happen in your office, I want you to give yourself grace. If something doesn't work, it's okay. You're going to get another shot at it, right? You're going to try it again. Maybe this is something that didn't need to happen, right? So I'm saying goodbye to 24 because just it's ready to go. 2024, your time is done. Get out of here. So hats off. Cheers to 2025. I'll see you all in the new year.
We're all super busy, so thank you for making time for me today. The show notes will have any links that we referenced in the episode. You can also find links for my book, events, and my online insurance course, Dental Insurance Design and Management. I speak often around the country on management and insurance issues. Come hang out with me in one of my classes. I promise you'll laugh and learn.